welcome to Innovate 2023's panel discussion, What's New in Digital Advertising. My name is Tabitha Talbot, and I'm Capture Higher Ed's Digital Marketing Director. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by a panel of experts from across multiple digital advertising mediums to talk about what's next in this ever-changing digital horizon. Subjects we're going to cover today will include the use of behavioral data to advertise effectively on streaming TV and gaming, enhancing geographically based marketing opportunities, especially as we move away from cookies and privacy continues to be top of mind. We'll talk about the use of advanced analytics to create landing pages that convert and help us grow our inquiry pools. We'll get some advice from our guest panelists in their areas of expertise on how to maximize digital efforts at your university. Really today, we're just going to spend 45 minutes talking through the latest trends in digital advertising and how they might be used to recruit in the marketing space. So with that, let's bring in our panel. As I introduce our panelists, we'll have them come on camera and on mic. Today we are joined by Jennifer Lawnchair, co-founder of Ambio EDU. Welcome, Jennifer. Nice to have you. We've got Chris Pattinson, co-founder and CEO of Squeaky Analytics. Hi, Chris. And then we've got Stacy Griggs, Chief Executive Officer from El Toro. Hi, Stacy. Welcome, panelists. We're so over the moon excited to have you all to talk all things digital today. So let's start with some brief introductions. I'd love to hear a little bit about each of your backgrounds and where your areas of expertise are. And I will shoot it over to Jennifer first.
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Tabitha.
Yes.
So as Tabitha said, I'm Jennifer Longcar. I am co-founder of Ambio EDU, which is, if you're probably saying we've never heard of that company before, you would probably be right, because we are new I think I'm on day 64 of actually going live out into the higher ed universe with it. But I've been in this industry for over 15 years, spending a majority of my life working. I was actually at Carnegie for 13 years. I was at Net Natives for the past 2 years, and then recently decided to go off on my own and bringing performance connected television to higher education. So I've had my hands in a little bit of everything for the last 15 years when it comes to higher ed marketing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and congratulations on your new endeavor.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll kick it over now to Chris.
Thanks, Tabitha. Hi, everyone. So my name is Chris, and I'm the co-founder and CEO at Squeaky Analytics. And well, I also feel that we're a new company, not quite as new as Jennifer's company, a couple of years old. My background actually is in software and web design for various different, primarily SaaS companies, and that's typically on the software side, but also helping with the web and marketing design and product leadership. And that's actually what led me to founding Squeaky, which is that more and more the marketing teams I was working with were discovering that they were blind to what was going on with their users because they're facing increasing restrictions around user privacy. It's particularly prescient in the EU with changes like GDPR legislation, but there's mirrored legislation like the CCPA and things in the US. So Squeaky was founded particularly to address that concern. So it's a conventional web analytics tool, like you might be familiar with Google Analytics or Hotjar, but then it's with a big focus on ensuring that you can maintain user privacy whilst not losing any of the important data points that you need to make decisions in your business.
Thank you so much. And as you can see, Chris is joining us from across the pond, and it's what, 9 o'clock where you are now?
Yes, yeah, 9 o'clock.
Thank you for taking the time out.
No
and
problem.
last but not least, we've got Stacy.
Hi, I'm Stacy Griggs, CEO of El Toro. We're 10 years old. We have 25 different patents on processes to map and manage digital advertising better. We started with a process to map addresses to IP addresses and device IDs, and then from there can better target and measure digital advertising.
Thank you all. All right, so now let the fun begin. I've got a question for all three of the panelists that I think will be relevant from each of their areas of expertise. So looking forward with so much innovation that is happening in the digital space, what do you guys see as the next big game changer in digital advertising? And I'm going to put Stacy on the spot first for this one.
You know, it's interesting because Chris was talking about analytics, and you know, the reality is digital advertising has for far too long been focused on measuring metrics that really don't matter. Things like clicks and click-through rate and cost per click. And we're really evolving into a scenario that, you know, we need to be able to measure things that matter, like how many of these people converted, how many of these people became your students, how did we matriculate people through the pipeline, and what was the incrementality of those things? How much more likely were people to convert based off of exposure to advertising, and then measuring the aggregate effectiveness and then return on ad spend. And I think that's actually the, you know, kind of the, you know, the undiscovered country in digital advertising right now. And it's pretty exciting.
I think this is actually that question is really good. And I think the three of us together are going to make a good team in terms of answering these types of questions, because everything that I know that everything Stacy's saying is right on in terms of what I'm going to say as well. And I know Chris is around that conversion rate optimization and things like that, and making sure that things are converted at the highest way possible. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and say, for the future, I mean, obviously I'm here and what I'm bringing to the table is connected TV and performance television, which really quickly, just for those of you that don't know what it is, because believe it or not, I do get questions about CTV. Is that cable TV? Is it closed circuit TV? Is it culinary TV? Like, I've had every question under the book. What does the C stand for? And the connected piece, really connected TV is streaming television on the TV that actually hangs on your wall. And I think that exactly going along with what Stacy just said, I think the end of the day, right, what we need to measure and how we get there is butts and seats at the end of the day in higher education, right? So it's those conversions at the end of the day are the most important metrics in how you get there, and having a holistic campaign that encompasses, you know, pulling in different things to get you to that point, I think is the biggest thing. So I have to say that adding in the ability now to be able to use the type of metrics and targeting like Stacy was just talking about, to reach students, to add in another lever, if you will, to their digital campaigns, their digital marketing, that not only is branding and awareness, but also measuring that impact and that attribution at the very end of the day.
Excellent. I think that's a great
Yeah,
insight.
a question, maybe this is for both of you, but particularly for Stacey, because we've just seen last quarter that Meta has had one of their best quarters in several years, and that's off the back of strong headwinds from Apple changing their approach to how they pass data on to third parties about referrer data, and yeah, just masking more of the traffic that comes through and in the Safari browser. But what they've done is they've pivoted to use their legacy data and use machine learning to then present people predicted ad performance and use that to improve the performance of ads. And I guess I'm wondering if you recognize that in your work, especially having a business been around for a decade now and having a much larger pool of data, do you see that as being part of the future direction for how you target advertising, is relying on learned data from historical performance, less so than future targeted data that's more granular and personalized?
We're a combination. We very much, you know, when we look at, you know, call it how to identify where people are and who they are online, we've got a 17 petabyte primary data store, and we ingest data all opt-in the US at about 5 million records a second, 24/7, 365. So several trillion points of data a week. And, you know, but having, you know, call it, you know, 10 years worth of backward data to go say, okay, what do we know about, you know, population and phone usage and all of these things? You know, those things all make it stronger. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, we've essentially doubled in size every 18 months over the last 10 years. And, you know, we're seeing this, you know, kind of continued growth path where it's just, you know, the bigger we get, the more interesting and compelling our value proposition becomes for customers.
Excellent. So I don't think we can talk about data without really talking through this new and not so new, but very highly trending privacy issue. What are you guys doing to really make sure that you're being in compliant with all of these new privacy practices and that you're still able to collect and use the data that you need to reach the right students at the right time, the right prospects at the right time?
Yeah,
Well,
so
yeah, I was gonna throw it to Chris too. Yeah, that's probably a great for you.
well, to say that I I mean it's interesting to be on a panel with people that are very focused on the targeting and identity piece, and I guess I'm like an interesting juxtaposition to that. But I do think that it's often the case that businesses will need both, and particularly when it's in this sort of the audience identification and targeted advertising, it's very hard to do that with a sort of if your data is in a black box. But what we focus on is that for 90+% of the data that you get in the standard analytics suite, you don't actually need to know who anyone is. It's what the data is showing you on aggregate, and it's the trends and changes in that data over time that you're going to use to inform your decision making. You don't need to know who an individual person was when you're reviewing a heat map to investigate the performance of a landing page. You don't actually need to know who a user is if you're watching back a session recording, or if you're viewing other like event metrics around that user's visit to your site. But you do want to know what people are doing when you add it all up. So once you take away things like IP or cookie-based tracking, then it doesn't really make much of a difference. So like those are those two of the big hurdles on a compliance point of view. And then the other issue that so the reason there's a few privacy-friendly analytics tools on the market, but most of them are just basic dashboards and a bit of light event tracking. And none of them really tackled session recording or heat maps because they're concerned about capturing sensitive data there. And that's one of the things that we've tried to address, so that by default, the moment you install the tracking code from our tool, you're not capturing any sensitive text-based data, and you're not using IP and cookie-based tracking. But then afterwards, depending on your business needs and what level of consent you wish to request from your users, you can choose to progressively increase the amount of data you're exposing to our platform. So you come along, turn it on, and out of the box, you're compliant and you're not taking any personal data from anybody. But if your business says, actually, we really need to know who these users are landing on our page, and we want to link the data from analytics with our ad network data, you just have to request consent from your users. So it's privacy first, get 90+% of the data that you need for the primary decision making. But then if you need to get to that really granular data and it's vital to your business needs, then you just choose to can request consent from users. And then from that, you can basically perform all the standard, more targeted operations you would in a traditional analytics tool.
I think it's going to be really important for schools, especially to be working, if they're working with vendors or if they have an amazing in-house team. I think it's going to be more important than ever for them to be doing something and working with a platform that allows for tracking of first-party information as we get away from the cookie-based targeting and things like that, whether it's something that has an integration with their CRM. So if it's Slate or Salesforce or whatever they're working in, so when you get down to that PII data, you can do matchbacks and things like that, because like Chris said, a good digital marketer really doesn't need to use PII data in terms of anything to be able to match data back in analytics and things like that. But at the end of the day, at the end of the campaign, if you can transfer that data back and forth to be able to marry kind of that enrollment data with that marketing data to figure out the true cost per enrollment and the attribution models and looking at all of that, I think that's the thing that we all have to remember and keep in mind.
But I even think with that, you can say, here's ad spend per domain, whether it could be Facebook or Google, and then here's people that triggered the registration event on your website. And in both those instances, you can attribute saying this is the volume of people from any given ad source that triggered this conversion event. You don't need to know who anyone is, and you can still say we spent this much here and had this much conversion.
Well, the other thing is, and like agree with everything you guys have said, but your vendors, your ecosystem, and all of us on this call, I'm sure have done the same thing. Invest heavily in ensuring compliance. We've went out and hired a compliance team that, our general counsel's, former DOJ, or associate general counsel's former FBI, our chief of information security's former NSA. And, I was actually on call with a really big publicly traded company the other day and their compliance team. And afterwards, they're like, you took something that is most companies', biggest weakness, which is compliance, and turned it into a strength. And I'm like, yes, that was exactly our plan. So thank you for recognizing it. That we want to make sure that this is something that's important, and it's important that you get right. So from hashed IDs to data clean rooms to any of a number of things to make sure that you're dealing with data in the safest possible way, and understanding 12 different states have data privacy laws now, and you're probably going to have 40 of them that have them by the time they're done. And you need partners that understand all of these things and help you guys stay compliant.
For sure, for sure. I think another big issue that we are moving into is just targeting those students that are under 18. What advice do you have for those on the webinar to really still get in front of those students?
So, there's a big differentiation between under 18 and under 16 in U.S. law. Because you've got CHOPA that is problematic for anybody under the age of 16. But when you look at that 16 to 18-year-old range, I mean, that's really the age of where you're targeting for students. With us, we really target at a household basis, because we understand that first of all, the parents are also pretty equally involved in this decision-making process. And our process is very much to map a IP address and device IDs to a household, and then target appropriately to that household, sometimes based off of context of where we're serving the ads, if we want to get to a younger population or an older population. But it's interesting when you look at the accuracy of cookie-based identification. It is voodoo at best. We've got a blog post that we are publishing the next couple of days on the accuracy of cookies, which is it's just crazy bad.
So I'm similar to Stacy in the way that we target as well. The way that Ambio targets is really on the household level, being able to identify mobile devices at the high school level or community college location level, and then map those IDs to the household, right? And then we can take TV commercials and put them right into the household. So now, and you're not just getting necessarily in front of one student, you're getting in front of, like Stacy said, you're getting in front of all the devices in the household, in front of the parents, in front of any of the stakeholders there as well. And so I think that your branding then is going to start earlier, right? Because you're going to be able to hit those students a little bit earlier. And so it's creating that awareness for your school, and then being able to, for me personally, or for Ambio, I guess it's riding in an area that is not necessarily as crowded as digital. So, but again, and I think this will go for this entire conversation, and we all know that there is no silver bullet that's going to solve everybody's problems and bring them all the students that they need every year. And so it's a matter of combining efforts, right? It's good SEO, it's household targeting with programmatic and paid search advertising, it's IP targeting, it's CTV, it's a layering effect of all these other things, and starting earlier in the process to kind of get you there.
Yeah, definitely. Do you notice in our IP targeting and then in our OTT CTV areas where those in the pipeline work better than others? Are we more in brand awareness when we're talking about connected TV? Are we more in yield when we're talking about more of those IP targeting?
So personally, I think, the CTV thing, the TV thing is interesting because TV has been around forever, and it's continues to be a way to reach a mass audience and get your message across, create like an emotional attachment with people. And in the past, the problem has been measurement. And so it's always kind of been chucked into a plan as a brand awareness piece, right? Like we know we should do it, but we can't measure it anyway. So it's really just like putting up a billboard. Well, where we get away from that is we have a platform that allows you to measure all the way through. And so you can have both, right? So you can have, I just talked to a school the other day and I said, you can have an always on overarching kind of branding for the institution kind of going. And then as you are in different times during the year, strategically putting in different messages, just like you would with IP targeting. If you were doing an application push in the fall, or you were doing something for yield in the spring, you can do that throughout the year with CTV as well. It's the same idea.
I'm good. Sorry, just to jump in because I don't have a huge amount to add in terms of the very specifics of advertising, because it's not my wheelhouse. But I'm curious, Jennifer, if when it's on the digital television environment in the home, does that mean that the advertising, the ability to put ads in front of people extends to any application that's using the smart television? So it could be through YouTube or through Hulu or whatever individual apps that are on the smart television, or is it like it's pegged to particular, I don't know, like network providers or something?
No, so actually, it is actually through any of the apps that you're using through the TV. So really, the thing that's so great about CTV and streaming TV now is that our TVs have become just another digital device. You can't really even buy a TV anymore that's not a smart TV. And so as soon as you get it, you bring it home, you plug it in, it's connected to your Wi-Fi. So there's various different networks that you can go through, whether it's Roku or Pluto or Hulu or YouTube or Peacock or Paramount, but you also have your regular stations too, like your NBC or ABC, all of those as well. So, and then there's still people that are using linear TV, which is set boxes, which is so like Comcast or Xfinity or Cox Cable and things like that. So I think it's really important too, to be able to not only do the CTV through the streaming apps, but also writing in through linear as well is still digital. You're still doing commercials. It's just not necessarily through the apps. So fortunately, that makes up about 62% of people viewing are either through the apps and through the CTV streaming or through the linear. And then there's about 20% that just use really still kind of regular TV. But really now, like that, if you say like regular TV is really like those, I mean, some people might have a Samsung TV and you'll notice when you plug it in, there's Samsung has their own menu that you can go through. Those are also showing commercials as well. So it's all digital now. Everything is digital and it's going through any available app really that's out there.
And Tabitha, your question also was like, are these, branding campaigns or these yield campaigns? And, I often think, the difference between them is, are they targeted? If you go out and put something on TV, it's a branding campaign because it's just not targeted. You're going to get whatever percent of students are watching that show right now and their families. But if you target something, they immediately become yield campaigns. And then if you target it well and you've got good, good kind of metrics all the way through, then you can actually measure it and look at what your yield was.
Excellent. Great insights. I know we've been talking a lot about platforms and really getting people to see your advertisements, but I'm really interested to hear more from Chris about once they click on an ad, how do they get to an optimized landing page that's really going to help them convert and turn into an identification? What are you doing with your analytics to decide what that landing page looks like?
Thanks, Tabitha. Yeah, I mean, in fact, I think that's how we connected in the first place, is because you'd started looking and using Squeaky for some of your work. Yeah, so really we take quite a broad-based approach to that. So we have some conventional metrics and dashboards around audience traffic, device types, and geographic locations, and non-IP inferred geographic location. And yeah, so the things you'd expect to see in Google Analytics and tools like that. But then we pair it with some of these other, it's sort of a mixture between qualitative and quantitative views of your data. So it's heat maps is a good example. I know that's something that you've been using in your team. So with heat maps, what that's doing really is it's a big focus on what is garnering attention on the page. So it could be, for example, a scroll map. So in the scroll map, what you'll discover is how far down the page your visitors are traveling and engaging with your content. So if you've placed your primary call to action for people to sign up to a registration form or to join a newsletter, and that's 3/4 of the way down the page, but actually only 50% of people are getting there, then that's a huge missed opportunity. And you know that you need to move that message further up the page. And then likewise, you have the sort of more conventional heat maps people are familiar with around clicks. So, what content on the page is people clicking on most? And you'd use this content to then adapt the layouts, what text is on the page, how you're introducing messages to people. And then you get things like mouse maps as well. So we also do that. And that's actually polling where the mouse position is on the page multiple times a second, and then using that to create like a heat map across the page. And this is a bit more of a niche one, but the way that you might use that, for example, is if you had a banner at the top, for example, of your web page, and you have image content on there, and perhaps it could be like a mixture in the context of education. It might be some kind of different array of pictures relating to activities on campus. It could be some sports, it could be some people in library. And if you see there's lots more mouse activity over certain areas of imagery, then you know that that's the area that people are focused on and they want to engage with more, and they haven't actually even clicked. So it's before the click of what, and in the context of a blog post, that would be they're reading through the article, and people are holding their cursor for a long time over certain paragraphs and rereading certain sections. And that could be a note to improve clarity, or it could be because it's really engaging content. And that's an opportunity for you to extend the content that you have in that particular area. And and then off the back of that, there's much more granular event related activity. So you can really track any and every event on the site. We have a bunch of this default stuff, like I was saying, around scrolls and clicks, but you might say that you want to track I don't know, every time that an email is fired for a newsletter targeting a certain subset of your audience, and then also pair that against data on how many people are actually visiting the content on site that relates to that. And once they get to that content, how many are converting. So you can see that journey from email sent out to a targeted group. Once they land on your site, is the content performing? And then of the group that it did perform for, how many of them have actually gone to convert? So, yeah. Lots of different things, and it's all anonymous. So
This is something that we've had some experience with that's been really helpful for us, where we've learned just about the lengths of RFI forms for our partners. And we've noticed that where exactly the drop off was for our partners and how many form fills they actually wanted to put in. So that's been something that was really helpful for us specifically.
I think it's really important. Oh, sorry, Tabitha. I was just going to add in, I think it's really important. Something Stacy mentioned earlier that is important to me too, in terms of our measurement, is he mentioned incrementality and making sure that that is a metric that you're measuring. And for those people that don't really understand that, that's really having kind of a control group almost, and being able to understand, what percentage of your audience actually, not only saw your ads, but those ads that actually drove them to take that final completion and that final step, and being able to say, okay, these people, this is definitely our audience. They didn't see our ads. We know that they were not presented an ad. We didn't get in front of them. Only 15% of them, ended up applying or enrolling. And over here, we know that, same audience exactly. And they did see your ads. They were presented your ads. We got into their household. We did a match back, whatever it is. And we know that drove 83% of those people to take that next step, whatever that next step is that you're measuring, because it can be anything. It can be an RFI, it could be an application, it can be a deposit, whatever it is. I think having that ability to be able to track that is really, really important as well.
Yeah, good way to if you're looking at marketing platforms, what they should mention to you is what they call PPNOC, or pre-post net of control. And anybody that took statistics and remembered, it kind of remembers that. I mean, it is the way to measure these types of campaigns.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. So as we're talking a little bit more about tactics and stories, what are some tactics or a specific campaign you guys can think of that just really crushed it, that you think would resonate with our universities?
Well, I'm not going to have a ton to share today because I've been doing this for 64 days, but I can tell you in higher education, I can tell you that outside of higher education, and my partners that I do have been doing this outside of higher ed for quite some time. And not only, I think for CTV, adding that in as a component in higher ed, I think it was really important that I brought this to higher education because there's such a need for it to kind of broaden your reach and your message. But then we want to measure all of what we need. We need to measure all of our ROI at the end of the day. But a couple of the things that I will say a CTV campaign does is, number one, we can measure that attribution all the way through, right? So that we can tell you at the end of the day, how many students enrolled, were presented your commercial, how many took that next last step after seeing it, what the time frame is that they did that. But then also, it's important, like I said, to be running digital campaigns as well at the same time, because 95% of people are watching TV and they also are on their phones as well. So you want to make sure you have a good paid search campaign going on, right? So that when they do see something that they like, they're searching it and then they're going there. But it also creates what we call a halo effect across the board. And one great thing is that any digital campaigns that you're running and that are live, when you add in a CTV component, or an OTT/CTV component, what you see is an exponential lift across the board on everything that you're doing, every strategy. And the more times that they're presented that, the higher those conversion rates are. So that's something that, just like digital 10 years ago, when we brought digital to higher ed and nobody was doing it, but it was already happening out in the consumer world, and we could bring success stories from there. That's kind of where I am right now. I can say it works. I know it works. Now I'm bringing it to higher ed, knowing that you need to be able to track this and it's going to drive enrollment. So I don't necessarily have any client stories yet. Talk to me. Let's talk next year again, and I'll give you a whole bunch of them.
No, I think that's so important. Really having a multi-channel approach is everything. It's hard when there's a tendency to want to focus in on one channel that's giving you the best bang for your buck, or you think it's giving you the best bang for your buck, but really having that layered approach is where it all comes into play.
I'll give you a couple from and like obviously the bulk of what we do is like targeting students that you've got a list of students, you want to go after them, and we'll target them digitally and make them more likely to apply, enroll, etc. But like when you look at like interesting strategies or kind of different kind of ways to think of things, we work with one of the largest online universities in the world, based in the US. And they very much focus on adult learners. And what we've done with them is we take places where we know that their tuition reimbursement will cover the cost of the university, and then we geoframe, which is a process that we invented. A lot of people will do a different type of geo, but we geoframe these locations, capture the employees by looking at how often people were there, so we get rid of the visitors, and then we target those employees with "this is covered under your tuition reimbursement" type of advertising, and that is highly effective because people have this benefit that they're probably and you're depending on HR to advertise it. It's just not. They've got no vested interest in going out and really making sure people take advantage of that benefit. The other one that I think is really interesting and novel is we do some advertising to current first-year students to help reduce summer melt. You've got this, these students that, you spend a lot of dollars to get them enrolled in your school, and then some substantial percent of them don't come back for the second year. So every student that we can make come back that wouldn't have come back is, another seat you don't have to fill. And those are both kind of unique alternative strategies that I've seen some of our clients do that, are really kind of forward thinking.
For sure. Those are excellent strategies. I know that we're going to have to wrap soon, so I've got one more question that I'd like to ask of all of you, and that is just in your individual areas of expertise or even in your backgrounds, what is one bit of advice that you would give to universities to really support them in meeting their, well, let's say meeting and exceeding their enrollment goals?
Well, I think, so just to jump in there, I think from the perspective of at least in terms of how well your site is performing when traffic does get there, so on the tail end of the advertising journey, then I think if you are switching to a privacy-centric analytics tool, then there's a lot of anxiety people have that surely I'm going to have less data. And first thing to say that is the inverse is actually true and I think Stacey and Jennifer have both alluded to the fact that cookie-based tracking is a bit of a nonsense anyway. And not only that, but 40% of people in the US reject the placement of cookies when they're asked if they can be included in their browsing experience. That means immediately 40% of your data is just not included in your on-site performance data. With a privacy-first analytics tool, you don't have that issue because 100%, close to 100%. Of course, there's other ways that people can stop third-party scripts from helping to capture data on their site, but much closer to 100% of the data will be captured on site. And hang on a second, I've got a bit of a segue there, but maybe come back to me because I want to say another point about that. But in my head, I had an answer to your previous question, and then I'm buffering now.
Good, we'll circle back to you.
So I would, on what you just said a few minutes ago, Tabitha, I think is something really important that I always tell clients, and I've always told clients in the past is, because we have a tendency to look at that last click, and only focus on that last click attribution, right? And I think that continues to be a conversation that continues to come up. And if you do that, you are eliminating, a lot. I think branding, when we talk about branding in general, people are like, oh, it's just branding. Well, branding is lead generation, because without branding, you wouldn't have last click, you wouldn't have that lead generation. And so I would caution people as well, if you're doing comprehensive campaigns, to be careful picking apart too much, and pulling out things and only focusing on those last click attribution, because you need to have a holistic campaign. And I always tell people, I'm really big on analogies. And I always tell people that I think that a good comprehensive digital campaign, it actually includes everything. I would say email campaign, I'd say branding, I'd say, CTV, digital, IP targeting, all of it, SEO, it's all like a bicycle. It has a lot of moving pieces and parts that technically you could take the handlebars off a bike and it's still going to go forward. You might crash into a tree. It's not going to, or, you might fall down a couple times. It's still going to go. Same thing. You could take the pedals off if you want. You'll have to Fred Flintstone your way to wherever you're going, but it definitely works better. And those pieces and parts are designed to holistically build off of each other to make the campaign and propel it forward to get you to the end result. So I would be very careful in just going in and automatically slicing and dicing things that you don't necessarily see that immediate return, and focus more on the types of tools that are out there, like what Chris is talking about, to make better decisions, more data-driven decisions on what is your audience actually doing in that time frame, things like looking at your landing pages and things like that. So I think that I guess working smarter overall and not harder, right, would be my key piece of advice.
Yeah, I always say to people that's the advertising is bringing the horse to the water, right? And then when you're on your site, it's making it drink. It's that old expression. Like, you need to be doing both parts. But sorry, just I wanted to come back to what I was saying before, if that's okay. The reason I was getting in a muddle was because it's related to the earlier question, and I thought I was going to accidentally segue into something completely tangential. But the thing that we've found with our customers, and because when we first started, we didn't even think, how do we support advertisers in a privacy-friendly way? Because we thought, surely no one's interested in privacy if they're interested in advertising. And what we found was that what people were saying is, look, we're getting way more data with you than we're getting coming into our legacy tools. But how do we actually get value out of that as advertisers? And the answer really to that is that UTM parameters become your best friend, because you can pass through a huge array of data about your campaigns, and right down to things like Gclip parameters in Google Ads that are specific to individual user profiles and audience groups. But you're not having this issue where you've got this 40% of the data gone missing because your analytics tool isn't capturing it. So the customers that we have that do have a heavy emphasis on advertising, I mean, there's not many with huge campaign budgets. There's some in 6-figure monthly budgets, but we've not got like multi-million-dollar advertisers on our platform. but they all rely heavily on UTM parameters for everything. And that's also not that I want to encourage this necessarily, but of course, where Apple does its best to strip out certain UTM parameters now in the Safari experience, it's also the case that they strip out the parameter, but you can also pass parameter values into other parameters. So you can actually smuggle in data that they don't really want you to capture by appending it to parameters that they don't block. So yes, UTM parameters are your best friend if you want to take a privacy-centric approach to attributing your source advertising with your on-site analytics data.
I'll just wrap up on what Jennifer said and what Chris said, which is, there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And you look at this ecosystem where we live in an omni-channel world, and we love working with a partner like Capture that has assembled a bunch of different tools and can package all of those things together. So you don't have to be an expert in everything. You don't have to learn how to use our 3 different tools. They'll package it all so that you get a very good user experience that is very coordinated.